Okay, welcome to the Children and Youth Fund Oversight and Advisory Committee meeting on Monday, May 3rd, and we're going to call the meeting to order at 3:02. And who's doing roll call? Let's see, Rebecca on.
Hi there. Sorry, Molly.
Are you going to do roll call today?
Yeah, I'm on board to support you guys.
Great.
Okay, let's start with Chair Molly Matul.
Here.
Vice Chair Jada Curry. She will not be attending. She has given us notice. Member Michelle Lee.
Here.
Member Julie Roberts-Fong.
Here.
Member Aaron Yen.
Here.
Welcome, Aaron. And Member Jennifer Salermo will not be able to attend today. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to make sure that all the members, you guys all saw my email, and hoping that we can at least extend to at least 5:15 today. We have a stacked agenda, and I just want to make sure that we give enough time for comments and discussion, etc. So does that sound okay for everybody? Okay, great. Okay, so let's go to item number 2, adoption of the agenda. I just want to call a couple of things to your guys' attention as and would like to move that we change the order. So we move item number 8, the report of the OAC chair, to immediately following this item. And then I just want to call out that we have duplicate items of items 9 and 10. So we don't need both of those. So with that, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended, changed? Anyone?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. And we have to do roll call vote. So Dory.
We need to do public comment on this.
Oh, sorry, public comment. Is there any? Let me pull up my list. If you are a member of the public joining our meeting and would like to make comment to this item, please select raise hand or *9 on your phone. Is that right, Dory? And we will call on you. Let's check. Colin, do we have any speakers in the queue?
We have no speakers in the queue.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dory, for that reminder. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended? Oh, sorry, roll call vote.
Yeah, hi. Okay, Member Aaron Yen.
Aye.
Member Julie Roberts-Fong.
Yes.
Member Michelle Lee.
Yes.
Chair Molly Matul.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The motion passes.
Great. Okay, so the next item is going to be our former item number 8, report of the chair. I don't really have anything other than to welcome Aaron Yen, our new member, and we have a small group, but we are, you know, as a friend of mine says, we're a small but mighty group that is here to lend our support to DCYF's work. And so I thought that we could just go around and do a quick introduction, so Aaron, can get a sense of who the merry group that you've joined here. So I thought that we could all just say our name. And in the past, we've talked about we said what seat we represent, but unless you've memorized what seat refers to what community, it doesn't really say a lot, especially to our members of the public joining the meeting. So if you could say your name, the community you represent, whatever your seat represents, and then since we're coming up on summer, and I know parents right now are looking ahead to summer, I thought we could all share either your favorite summer camp or summer class or activity that you did, or one of your children's favorite summer camps or activities that you like to send them to. So we'll just go around. Aaron, actually, why don't you start? And do you want to, you get the privilege of giving us a little bit more background about you. So if you want to start with that.
For sure. No, thank you so much. It's definitely an honor to be here. So I'm Aaron Yin. I'm currently the Chief Equity Officer for the COVID-19 Task Force with the Department of Public Health. And just a little background about me, that is not naturally what I've kind of found myself in that role through the pandemic. For most of my majority of my professional career, it's actually been working with youth and families. That's actually what I've been doing. Working in a nonprofit realm with a lot of, I see some colleagues here as attendees. I see Joni, I see Patty, I see a bunch of folks that I've worked with before. Matt, great people. Yeah, so worked in schools, after school programming, summer programming for quite some time, and in partnership with DCYF, with Maria and Dory. And so maybe a little slightly rusty, but it's always been kind of my passion to continue that work. So very honored to be here, thankful that I'm here. So look forward to continuing this work and talking to more folks and colleagues, and also my former colleagues here too as well. So it'd be great to continue this work. So that's me. Happy to answer any questions, but yeah, you can move however we want to do this.
I think the biggest question we have next is what group are you representing? And most
Okay.
importantly, your favorite summer camp or class that you did.
Oh yeah, I'm seat 10, and I believe that seat is a person who demonstrates commitment to improving access to quality of service for children and youth and families. So that's the seat I'll be representing. And then my favorite summer camp, I'm gonna be biased here. We used to run a camp in the summer at Balboa High School called Project Summer, where we did a lot of STEM programming, woodwork, just hands-on things with our students of transitional age and also our teens. So I think Joni, who's here, I think she's carried on the torch here, but that was something that, silk screening, 3D printing way before that even became a thing, gardening, carpentry. And we did the finale was we were able to hold kind of like a final event where we actually sold the products that the youth made and put it back into the program. So yeah, that was my favorite.
That's excellent. Great. Well, welcome, and we're thrilled to have you join the OIC. So thank you so much. Michelle, do you want to go next? Your name, your community that you represent, and your favorite summer activity.
Yeah. Hi everybody, I'm Michelle. I am chair 2. I represent the youth community. And I think my favorite summer camp, I think when I was like really young, I did something with SF Rec. It was, I think, volleyball or basketball over the summer. And I remember really liking it, and I continued to do that for the next few years.
Nice. Excellent. Wonderful. Julie?
Hi, welcome, Member Aaron. My name's Julie Roberts Fung. My pronouns are she and her. My seat is seat 8, which is I believe representing a child kindergarten through grade 8. And the community I hold myself most accountable to is Tenderloin families, where my kids go to school. And my favorite summer program has been, there's a school OST program that produces these amazing comic books that the kids put together. And they just had an event where they get added to the public library, so the kids can go in there and check out their books. It's also great as a parent because it's seamless year round, full time. Sadly, it was eliminated this year due to SFUSD budget cuts, but it's just really close to my heart that, the kids get to be super creative and, just do fun stuff where last year, a lot of the stories were like processing the pandemic. So it's both like academic, but the kind of thing that feels so fun, they don't really realize they're getting academic stuff. Thank you.
Nice. Excellent. And then I am Molly Matul, and I am the other half of Julie. I represent parents from older children, high school and up. And my favorite summer class that I took was a sewing class that my cousin and I took when I was, I don't know, I think I was in 3rd grade. And it was fun. We went there, we walked there by ourselves, and we got there and we got to sew different things. And it started kind of my interest in sewing, which I still do today. So just a few years later, right? So anyways, thank you for all the wonderful introductions. And Erin, again, welcome. So today we have a really, really packed agenda, and the 2 highlights, I'll say the 3 highlights that we're looking at today are the community needs assessment. We're continuing our governance conversation, and where we're actually being able to make some really good traction today. And then, of course, hearing from the service provider working group. So I want to make sure to give all those things time. So if I push through some of these other items quickly, please forgive me for being short if I am, because I really want to make sure that we have enough time for all the rest of the items. And the thing that I'll note for everybody, but for the members, is that we're not making any decisions on the CNA or the governance work today. So this is the introduction. We will have another bite of the apple next month at our June meeting to have discussions. So this is early, so I might cut off the conversation in order to make time, so we're not here till forever. And but know that we will schedule ample time in the June meeting to continue these conversations. So this is not the end. This is just the beginning of these conversations. Okay. So going forward to our next item is general public comment. So again, if you'd like to give a comment, please select raise hand or *9 if you're on the phone. And we'll give you your time. So Colin, are there any speakers in the queue?
No speakers in the queue.
Okay, great. So we will close public comment, general public comment. Okay, moving on to item number 4, approval of the January and the February 2022 minutes. So do I have a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Great, do I have a second to approve the minutes for January and February?
I'll second.
Great, thank you. Okay, is there any public comment on these items? So I'm going to pause just in case somebody wants to raise their hand or select *9. And I actually have the list up now, so I don't see any members of the public who want to make a comment. So we'll move on to our vote. Corey.
Okay, member Erin Yen,
Yes.
member Julie Roberts Fong,
Yes.
member Michelle Lee,
Yes.
Chair Molly Matul.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion
Thank you.
passes.
Excellent. One other thing, Erin, I just want to note is that we toggle between formality and informality in our in the way that we run our meetings. And I think the online meetings have called for a little bit more formality than when we were in person. But feel free to be casual and comfortable, and you don't have to say titles or for me or anything. We just want to make this very kind of communal and casual. So, okay, moving on. Speaking of trying to be casual, we have to do a resolution, which is the opposite. Next, number 5 is a resolution to allow teleconference meetings. So I would like to call for a motion to continue for at least 30 days of our meetings of the DCYF OAC to continue via teleconference online with public access and making sure that the public can participate, and to agree that we will vote on this in our next meeting within the next 30 days. So do I have a motion to approve that?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Great, thank you. Second,
Second.
great. Public comment. Raise hand, *9. Okay, seeing none, we'll close comment for this item and let's take a vote, Dory.
Okay, members, can you guys unmute yourselves?
Sorry, before we vote, could I ask for an update in, previously we've asked about the possibilities of hybrid. I'm just wondering if there's updates on that before we vote.
Through the chair, this is Maria Sue, Director of DCYF. In terms of hybrid meetings, we are at this moment in time not doing that. We're not opening up DCYF's office for hybrid meetings. And before we went into the COVID shutdown, we were actually using the Twitter Nest space, which is the space on the ground floor of Fox Plaza. And we still do not have access into that space. So both of these options are not available to us at this moment in time.
Thank you. I know with some other bodies, there's been a sort of sudden shift as different state or local entities have no longer been allowed to have meetings remotely. So I'd like to encourage us to explore the possibilities of having hybrid meetings and come back with a plan at the next meeting so that we can share how we can, if we're pushed to move or we feel it's time to move in person, how we can maintain the access of the online meetings as well.
And Julie, can I just clarify that, would it be your preference to stay hybrids for access, or are you looking more towards being in person?
I want to make sure that we maintain remote access. I think whether or not we're in person depends on COVID levels and safety, and it may not be our decision to make at a certain point. I know in some ways the state has sort of said, guess what, state of emergency is going to be over, so there's no provision for a remote meeting. So that means that we may be in a position that if we don't have a plan for a remote access option, that our only option would be in person. And I know in some other forums that's prevented people with disabilities and folks whose kids are under 5 and unvaccinated from participating. So I'd like us to figure out the technical and logistical challenges so we can maintain a remote option and maintain the access that folks have had. Thanks for the clarification, Chair Molly.
Sure. And yeah, we will look into it, because I feel like via this particular resolution that we're voting on, don't we have the say on that in terms of whether or not we're going to go? So we will likely meet again, and we will likely continue with remote meetings until this body decides that, along with the regulations on high, the safety regulations, it's most likely that we will stay remote. But we will report back. I have that. I am noting that as an action item. Okay, now let's vote.
Sorry, Chair Molly, are you going to redo the motion, or should we?
No, the motion stands.
Well, okay, so it stands. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, members, please unmute yourselves for the vote. Member Aaron,
Yes.
Member Julie,
Yes.
Member Michelle,
Yes.
Chair Molly.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The motion passes.
Great, thank you. Okay, because we have been so efficient, so great, we have a little more extra time for our CNA presentation, which is really, really important. So I want to hand it over to Maria or Miho for this presentation, and I want to say that I'd like this to finish up this item at 4:05, including public comment and OAC discussion. Okay. Over to you.
I'm going to hand it straight to Miho.
Hello, everyone. I think we're waiting for PowerPoint to come up. So in the meantime, I'll just say Hello and welcome to you, Member Aaron, longtime friend of the department. So my name is Amijo Gomes. I'm a Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives for DCYF. I'm going to be joined today by Wally Abrazaldo, who is our Acting Research Evaluation and Data Manager, and Ryan Sapinoso, who is a Senior Analyst on our Red Team and also the Project Lead on the CNA. And we are here to talk about the 2022 CNA, which is close to being finished. We shared a draft with you in your meeting packet. So you had an early draft of it, not completely finished, but certainly you have that first draft. And we are going to share some initial findings, high-level overview of the CNA today. All right, there you go. Okay, next slide. Great, thank you. All right, so I think it's always helpful just to situate the CNA within our larger planning cycle. And as you all know, DCYF is charter mandated to operate according to a 5-year planning cycle. And that includes 3 major phases. So the 2022 CNA, or our CNA, is generally our first phase. And the purpose of that document is really to shed light on the needs and disparities in community experiences, educational attainment, lifelong career outcomes, and resource access. Then in 2023, our services allocation plan will come out. And the purpose of that document is to allocate resources for services in alignment and in response to CNA findings, and of course, in collaboration with city partners. And then in 2024, we will release a request for proposals. It's our 5-year RFP for the funding cycle. And that's our competitive funding process to procure CBOs to provide services that address the disparities in experiences and outcomes in the CNA. Next slide, please. So we, as folks are aware, we are required to fund using an equity framework, but we want to just note that for us, for DCYF, equity is really more than just a charter mandate. It's both a lens that we use when we're thinking about this work, and it's also a set of practices that we use. And so just a few ways that equity shows up for us in our planning cycle. In the CNA, obviously, this process is grounded in community input and voice. We collect extensive information from the community. We engage directly with them. And that's all about gathering information that really provides that foundation of experience for folks in the city. We also are using disaggregated data as much as possible to try to surface racial disparities. Excuse me. For our services allocation plan, our allocation are specifically addressing CNA findings. And we use an equity analysis, which is a required part of that document, to basically check our allocations against current services available for children, youth, and families, basically as a way to make sure that we're meeting our equity goals. And then our RFP is targeting services to racial and high needs groups. And in our process prioritizes the selection of culturally competent providers for funding. I also want to note that there's a multitude of ways that DCYF staff is actually engaging in equity focused work. And it starts with ongoing professional development that we are doing regularly with our staff, at least monthly. And then the DCYF is also engaged in the city's racial equity action planning process. And that's really about looking at the way that we operate internally and also in the future externally to make sure that we are also operating with equity within our internal operations. Next slide, please. I also want to note that there are a couple of overlapping planning processes that are related to the CNA. And so we've led 2 of them in recent months, and that includes the Student and Families Recovery with Inclusive and Successful Enrichment, also known as SFRIs, and then of course the Children and Families Recovery Plan. I'm not going to provide too much details about what those plans are, but I do want to note that both of those processes leveraged a lot of the data collection that we did for the CNA. And so a lot of the findings that you're going to see in those documents is going to be consistent with what we have in the CNA. The other thing to note is that both of those documents will be very informative to us in our services allocation planning process, which of course is our next phase. I'll talk a little bit more at the end of this presentation about what that's going to look like. But just know that these 2 processes, which we've essentially been the backbone of, will be very helpful to us as we do our planning going into the new funding cycle. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, and he's going to start us off with the CNA timeline.
Thanks, Amijo. Yeah, before we start digging into actual content previews from the CNA report itself, we thought it'd be a good idea to just rewind and reground ourselves in what the work of the CNA looked like. So if we think focusing on timeline, the CNA that is in front of you all today is something that's been in the works since 2019. Um, just from the top again, our current funding cycle started back in July 2018. We started CNA work on schedule with our routine just funding cycle planning work back in October 2019. We did the We Are the City Family Summits, wherein each Board of Supervisors district held a summit attended by families, CBOs, young folks, to just speak to these questions and topics of how our children, youth, and families faring and what our community needs for services. That was just right before shelter in place hit, which threw things off to a pretty significantly different trajectory. Instead of ending the funding cycle as we scheduled in 2023, we extended it to 2024 for the entirety of the pandemic up until like the first set of vaccinations was available. There was no CNA anything, but then vaccines allowed us to think about planning forward again. So in May 2021, we reissued a updated CNA plan. From summer 21 up until winter 22, we were doing data collection, which meant pretty heavy community engagement, the form of focus groups, surveys, interviews with folks. And from spring up to now, we've been writing the report, synthesizing the research that we've gathered, structuring chapters in accordance and alignment with the previous plan. And we're now approaching the phase of CNA work that is more heavily just report review, presentation, and approval. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as mentioned before, community engagement was a pretty focal point for conducting CNA work. When we think about who we engaged, we know that we have to serve all children, youth, and families throughout the city. And we also know that we want to focus in on children, youth, and families with heightened needs as conditioned by experiences and characteristics, mostly just checking on like who is at the whose backgrounds or whose experiences put them at the intersection of different isms. So these are the communities that we focused in on for engaging and hearing back from when we conducted focus groups, when we went out for survey administrations. I'm not going to read off every bullet point. Suffice to say that these are the children, youth, and families that we've known to be in need for a while. Our service providers are already actively serving these communities. Next slide, please. Okay, more on community engagements. So this is just going to be a little bit of a number summary on community engagements. Back in 2019, again, we launched the We Are the City Family Summits. There was one in every Board of Supervisors district. Over 500 participants came out, and it mixes of providers, youth, and parents and caregivers. Next slide, please. And as we were working through community engagement, our partners throughout the city, our CBOs were really vital in just making sure that this could happen. So just want to acknowledge the efforts of all of our partnered agencies for opening doors to us to conduct a focus group with young folks, with parents. We had folks from other departments lending research our way. We had CBOs online with us conducting individual interviews to also just better understand things that maybe we couldn't glean from the types of responses that would come in forms of like, I agree or I strongly agree to a set of survey responses. So yeah, thank you to all who are online with us who helped just open doors to community engagement. Next slide, please. Okay. Focus groups was one form of community engagement that allowed us to collect information from our communities. In total, from summer to now, we conducted over 40 with over 300 plus participants. This spans a mix of parents and young folks, and the questions themselves will be available, the protocol, the line of questions in the appendices of the CNA. We were sure to provide interpretation support as needed, and folks were also compensated for their time and participation with incentives. Depending on how the pandemic was shaken out, these were mostly conducted virtually. I think we did manage to fit in a couple of in-person sessions when the surges were kind of less surging. There was a little bit of a lull in between the surges. Next slide, please. Surveys. Surveys were another major portion of our data collection from communities. We collected over 2,400 parent responses and over 2,800 youth responses. The surveys themselves, again, are going to be listed in the appendices of the final report for you all to take a look at and understand what types of questions young folks and parents were being asked to respond to, and also how we interpreted their responses into the findings that surface in the report chapter by chapter. They slightly vary depending on who we partnered with. For example, there was an SFUSD specific survey, which had questions phrased a little bit differently from the surveys that we had going out through Clarity Social Research, who is our primary contractor in supporting a lot of the research work here. So then they'll be appearing in the appendices of the report for you to take a look at. And also just want to call out, there is additional survey work that is coming up in the form of the RAPID survey. So as much as the CNA includes data collection from the community that will incorporate and inform future planning, there is some additional data that will be coming in to also build in additional considerations and understandings of community needs. Next slide, please. And interviews. Yeah, so focus groups, interviews, and surveys. The interviews were conducted with CBOs, SFUSD staff, citywide staff. These were opportunities for us to just get in a little bit of a deeper conversation thread than things that would come up from surveys again. Next slide, please. Okay. So now as we start transitioning more into report findings themselves, just wanted to remind everybody of DCYF's result areas. These are the conditions that we just really want and aim for all children, youth, and families to experience in the city. This is what we envision young folks who are thriving in the city to be able to just live through and hold. These are also pieces that were identified in our previous planning work, and these are going to be the main chapters or the main kinds of findings headers for the CNA report itself. Next slide, please. Okay. So we're going to switch over. I'll hand off to Wally in a sec, but this is the super duper zoomed out outline of the full report itself. It'll flow through mostly what we've been presenting like thus far in today's meeting, a little bit of introduction on our planning process, the CNA timeline itself. The chapters then move into an overview of children, youth, and families, as well as opportunity in San Francisco, which respectively we can think of as really summary population profiling and economic discussions that inform a lot of the additional discussions from the CNA chapters. Then we dive into the results areas chapters, nurturing families and communities, physical and emotional health, readiness to learn and succeed in school, readiness for college work and productive adulthood. We closed the report with some next steps, which give a little bit of a preview to the SAP and the planning phases that come after the CNA. Next slide. Okay. So I'll be back online in a sec, but passing off to Wally.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Wally Abrazaldo. So the first two sections of the report, as Ryan mentioned, give a demographic and economic overview of San Francisco. So there's a lot of detailed charts and tables in the report, as you know. Given our limited time, I'll just be highlighting a few data points here for you all. So next slide, please. So starting with this, so this chart shows population estimates and projections for San Francisco from the state and the census. So as you can see, San Francisco was on a growth trajectory prior to the pandemic, where the city is set to eclipse 900,000 residents this decade. COVID spurred the first population decline in the city in years. So you all are likely familiar with this, as the news has been covering the exodus of California residents to other parts of the country. The sharp decline in the blue line here represents a 6% decrease in the population from 2020 to 2021. And that drop is second only to New York among large counties in the US. So what does this mean for our work? Pre-pandemic, we know children and youth made up a small percentage of the population. 13% of San Francisco residents compared to roughly 20% in other metro areas like New York and LA. But despite making up a small percentage of the population, the number of kids in the city had been steadily growing year over year with growth in the overall population. Now, with the city's declining population, the number of youth in the city has also decreased. So there are roughly 4,000 fewer youth in San Francisco in 2020 compared to 2019. So will this continue? It's hard to say. The state's forecasts here, the red dotted line, which cover the period of our next funding cycle, they're largely based on pre-pandemic data, and they may be updated later this year. So maybe reality will be somewhere between these two lines, and hopefully we'll see updated forecasts from the state later this year. Next slide. So moving on, the high cost of living in the city, housing, and economic stresses in general were a major theme we heard throughout all our data collection efforts, even prior to COVID. We all know about the initial impact of COVID on the economy with the shelter in place and businesses shutting down. And the news talked about a V-shaped recovery from that period with support from the government and then restrictions slowly being lifted. But behind all that, the data discussed in our report shows the uneven impact of the pandemic and its heavier burden on low-income workers, BIPOC communities, and women. So the quote on this slide is from a survey of parents and caregivers that we administered during the Summer Together initiative in 2021. Families choosing between work and childcare is something that we heard about a lot. And this is something that DCYF, the city, and our CBO partners work collaboratively to address through initiatives such as emergency child and youth care, the community hubs, and Summer Together. So those experiences really demonstrated how childcare, aftercare, and summer programs are a really key and integral part of the economy. Next slide. And here are two more quotes. So one from a caregiver that we interviewed while attending a pregnancy pop-up village in the Bayview. And another here from a focus group we conducted with undocumented TAY. So I won't read the quotes here, but again, there's lots more in the report on demographics and economic need, as you know, but I'll pass the baton here, given our limited time, back to Ryan to highlight some data from other sections of the report.
Thanks, Wally. Yeah, I'll just continue the run with findings from the report. And just to reiterate what Wally mentioned, there is significantly more content and discussion in the report itself. Everything we're presenting today is pretty significantly abridged just for the sake of time and just to give folks a really quick preview of what to expect. The next chapter that we'll dive into is nurturing families and communities. A lot of the report content in this chapter just focuses in on, or this chapter will introduce the fact that young folks need safety, stability, and nurturing for thriving progressions into adulthood. This chapter also includes a discussion on how just caring adults are essential ingredients for making sure that those conditions are there. And we also use this chapter as a space to just acknowledge that there are systems, settings, wherein young folks really have especially compromised safety, stability, conditions of nurturing. So for example, we're thinking here of foster systems, young folks who are experiencing justice involvement, exploitation, trafficking, encounters with immigration, or just trying to figure out how to navigate immigration systems. So yes, those are topics that will come up in this chapter. We'll also talk through some mentions of general public safety and also close on the fact that community members really vocally mentioned that diversity is one of the city's strongest assets, and the diversity of the city is something that can continue to just be built upon, developed, activated to make sure that young folks are continuing to thrive into adulthood in community with each other. Next slide, please. So just examples of some quotes that speak to these topics again. We were hearing from young folks, again, that on the diversity note, that diversity is a great asset throughout the city. We also know that over the course of the pandemic, some sense of community safety, community cohesion across communities was pretty challenged. So it's a conversation topic playing forward on how do we make sure that what we've known to be a strong asset for the city continues to be so for young folks and for generations to come. From the parent side of things, we were also hearing from folks that, yeah, parents are the caring adults in the lives of young folks, teachers, community members as well. But as much as we also know caring adults are caring, there's a need for support and yeah, there's a need for support among the adults who care and look after young folks as well. Next slide. An example of some data that comes in from this chapter. This is from SFUSD surveying that asks young folks to identify if they feel like a staff or adult at their school cares about them. So it's a construct of 3 separate survey items. But what this allows us to see is that even pre-pandemic, there was room to grow when it came to the experience of young folks and just access or connection with caring adults. We also know that the pandemic itself, it severed community ties, it severed relationships. So whatever room to grow was seen pre-pandemic, we probably expect has become even more roomy. Essentially, there's an ongoing and continuing need to just make sure that young folks have caring adults in their lives. Next slide, please. Okay. Next super zoomed out chapter preview is on physical and emotional health. So in this chapter, we acknowledge that San Francisco is generally thought of as one of the nation's healthiest cities. But because there are disparities that exist economically, there are disparities that exist across race, ethnicity in terms of who experiences what types of health conditions, challenges. These are things that we know we want to work on in our services and planning. And we also know that, as COVID is still around, there are still tools being taken on the mental health of communities that we engage with. Next slide, please. So examples of data to expect from this chapter. I guess on the physical health side of things, nutrition is pretty key and pivotal there. We have data from the SF Marin Food Bank where they surveyed clients and found that among folks who were worried about food insecurity, it's households with children and especially single parent households with children who were vocalizing most concern around food security. On the other side of the slide, if we think about just physical health and mental health kind of coming together in this notion of suicide ideation attempts and risks, there's some pretty alarming data coming up from the pandemic and things that, again, were just escalated prior to. We spotted data and research calling out that suicide ideation or suicide is the second leading cause of death among American Indian / Alaska Natives. Among Black youth, we saw the suicide rates doubling, comparable rates affecting young folks in Asian American families, as well as seeing that there are unmet mental health needs. And from SFUSD survey data, we were also spotting that a pretty clear disparity in ideation trends among young folks who identify as LGBTQ+ versus those who don't. Next slide, please. Additional quotes and data coming in from this chapter. We were hearing in our community engagements that mental health needs, mental health supports were just vocalized everywhere. From the pandemic, prior to, everybody was just saying, we just need someone to talk to, we need someone to share emotion, to provide us with some emotional support, young folks and parents alike. From a survey that we conducted with SFUSD students, we were seeing that when they were asked about what types of health services and supports they would find useful, at both the middle school and high school grade ranges, stress management, depression, anxiety, physical health topics and supports came up as the top 3. Next slide. Okay. Another preview of another chapter. So again, for each chapter, I would again just ask folks to remember there's a lot more data in the full report. Please take a look and let us know reactions and thoughts as we get there. The next chapter we'll go into is readiness to learn and succeed in school. This is where we start exploring how young folks are experiencing K through 12 experiences. We call out and acknowledge that there are pretty well documented gaps in opportunity and achievement in education systems and education achievement. So we'll start digging into those topics. Next slide, please. Some examples of quotes to come up from this chapter. We were hearing from young folks and families. We were hearing from families of students with disabilities that there were particularly challenging settings and experiences. The availability of services seemed kind of rough to locate. The staff that they were working with also seemed to leave some need to provide some stronger supports. Young folks from families with incarcerated parents were also noting that there's just a lot of academic support that's needed. This is not unique to just that particular demographic. Young folks across the board were calling out that with interruptions to in-person learning and the need to acclimate to virtual learning and now needing to acclimate back to in-person learning, it's introducing significant disruptions to just the learning experience, and folks are concerned about if they're on track or not. So this also kind of coincides with the previous chapter's discussion of mental health needs among our young folks. Just the stress of one's own academic performance is also inducing heightened levels of worry and anxiety for young folks as they think about their futures. Next slide, please. Additional charts that speak to, again, disparities that we've called out previously. Race, ethnicity. At the kindergarten mark, we can see gaps that have been previously researched and documented. This also overlaps with socioeconomic status that we know, as we know, to be a conditioner of disparities in education. More in the actual chapter. Next slide, please. Okay. Readiness for college work and productive adulthood. This is where we start to explore how young folks and families are faring in terms of workforce development. We also acknowledge that as much as there are disparities that surface in K-12 education, they don't disappear when it comes to the exit from high school. They continue shaping young folks' opportunities and earning potential professional opportunities once they enter into adulthood. Next slide, please. So data that we were able to collect from San Francisco SFUSD high schoolers, we're able to see that when it comes to thinking about their future, young folks, they want to go to college, they want to earn living wages, they want to land careers that offer them stability and growth. But we also can take a look at the college going rates of young folks and see that whatever disparities that were observed in K-12 continue to impact who goes to college and who gets to enjoy the benefits and privileges that advanced education provides for future career and adulthood. Next slide, please. And additional quotes in this chapter that represent things we're hearing from the community. Parents were interested in financial literacy supports and services for young folks, essentially expressing once young folks start due earning money, it'd be great to help them learn savings, money management, et cetera, wealth building. And I think this wraps back to the previous economic discussions. Young folks, families alike, were just stressing that whatever opportunities are available for employment, the wages need to be sufficient to cover the cost of living that is just known to be pretty challenging here in the city. Okay, next slide. I think that wraps it up for the chapter by chapter previews. And back to Amico.
All right, thank you, Ryan. So that was just really just a very high level overview of what's in the CNA. There's quite a bit in there. Definitely hope that this has started to get you thinking about how, your own review of the document and give you a little bit of a teaser of it. But let me give you a little bit of a sense of what's going to happen next year, and then we will open up for discussion. So in terms of next steps, obviously we're having this discussion here. The document is very close to being done in its final designed state. And so at the next meeting on June 13th, we will provide that final document to you, discuss the findings further, and then that will be the time when you all will vote to approve the CNA. And then in July, we will look to get that approval from the Board of Supervisors as well. Next slide, please. And then after that, we transition to the services allocation plan. And so just to give some very brief details about what that process will look like. In terms of timeline, it'll happen during the 22-23 fiscal year. We'll be developing it during that time. And we anticipate using a similar timeline in terms of the approval. So a June OAC approval and a July Board of Supervisors approval. The SAP is going to be very heavily grounded in data. As I mentioned, the CNA obviously is the basis for it. SFRIs and the Children and Families Recovery Plan are also very important to that process. And then, of course, we have a large amount of grantee data and evaluation findings that we also want to bring in to those discussions. And then lastly, we will be aspiring to just better align our services in key service areas with relevant city and SFUSD partners. That's really a key part of that process. We'll be doing that. And then in terms of how we will do some engagement with the OAC, grantees and service providers. So one of the main things we want to do is convene both grantees and then the OAC, obviously separately, but the idea being that we want to engage with those findings and hear from our providers what some of the solutions are in their mind to address some of these findings. We want to do the same thing with the OAC, and those data points will be very important to us as we think about what we actually will support in the services allocation plan. And then we're also thinking about other ways for us to gather input from folks, including young people, the general public, as well as our grantees, about the actual allocations that are going to go into the SAP. So more to come on that down the road, but just note that we are thinking about that engagement right now. Next slide, please. All right, so that's going to end the presentation for us, but we wanted to just open up to just some discussion here with a couple of guiding questions for that. So knowing that you may not have done your full review of the document at this point, what CNA findings most stood out for you, and also what topics, community experiences did you find most surprising in the CNA? We'd love to hear that from you all. And so opening up to that now.
Great, thank you. Let's start with public comment first. If any members of the public or our service provider working group chairs have any initial comment, let's start with you guys, and then we'll move on to the OAC. Okay, so if there's anyone who wants to make comment, please select raise hand or *9 if you are on the phone. I'm pausing so we can make time if people have a thought and want to raise their hands. Okay, let's close out public comments. I see we have one comment from Frederic that the population decline is striking. Yes, indeed, that it is. Let's go to the OAC. So anyone have comments about what CNA findings stood out to you the most, and what topics or experiences from the community did you find most surprising? Comments from the OAC? Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, well, first, I appreciate the overview. Thank you so much for providing that context. It definitely gave a deeper insight to what you guys scoped out. And I haven't had to find time to just go in detail to take a look, but definitely I can say that, a lot of the concerns are very familiar in general, especially, during the pandemic time, working through that and still in it. Some of those concerns still resonate across the board with our families. So I can just generally say that I know, during being a parent myself as well, these 2 years have been incredibly difficult, even more so why this is important, that we provide these spaces and these opportunities for our young folks to, socialize and remember what it's like to have these type of programmings in their life. And so I definitely appreciate the data points that you guys pulled out to just kind of give a high level overview again. So that's my initial take back, that I think the city in general is facing this across the board lapse and kind of like engagement with our families. And there's so many things, including, you know, business and all that. All these things kind of like going together hand in hand. And so I'm happy to work with those on this call who are attendees, or, you know, feel free to reach out to me as well to give me more details of what you guys see in your organizations as what's like most urgent for you guys. But I've definitely seen the similar trends. And yeah, it is striking about the population decline. I mean, that's something that we've seen for a little bit now.
Thank you for your comments, Julie.
I wanted to really appreciate the work that's gone into this document. I haven't been able to go through everything in detail, but I certainly will. I wanted to highlight a couple of areas that I'm really glad that we've got some good data on, and ask a couple of questions that I'm wondering if in the remaining focus groups we might address. It's really terrific to see the data around the disaggregated data for Middle Eastern, Native, Pacific Islander, LGBTQ, and undocumented youth. I know that's an area that folks have been kind of working on deepening. And it was striking to see that those communities, you know, there's very different experiences across all those communities, but I did see that there were some disproportionate impacts there around mental health, connection to trusted adults, bullying, sense of safety, the ability to afford to live in the city, that, you know, align with some of the, you know, the ongoing needs that we've seen lifted up for Black and Latinx and New Asian immigrant families. So it's really terrific to have the detailed information there. I wanted to thank folks for the efforts on that. A question I wanted to ask around for some follow-up on is whether we've talked about trying to kind of get at the intersection of LGBTQ undocumented youth. And so I'm curious if any of the focus groups coming up, or if any of the efforts previously have given us an opportunity to get some insight into that experience. And then the two other areas, I'll just kind of throw everything in at once, and then folks can kind of come back to it. The two things that were most striking to me, the transitional age youth being the group that are declining most dramatically, and the demographics of you know, youth that we're losing out of the city, makes me, you know, it's not a surprise given our cost of living, cost of housing, inadequate wages. So this takes me to kind of the service provider working group efforts to increase pay. I know many of the CBO staff are transitional age youth from communities of color. I'm also thinking about the city's efforts, sort of the great hire up, and I'm wondering if there's any economic data or opportunities in focus groups to identify whether there's interest or opportunities to connect youth while they are still in school with some of the city jobs, you know, where there's openings, and some of which have good benefits and good wages. And if there's an opportunity for us to sort of identify a strategy for matching students to some of those jobs and keeping them in the city. And then the last one is, I was just really struck by the graph that looks at the demographic change in the city and the decrease of families, but also who's remaining in the city. There's a chart that says that 40% of families in the city right now are upper income, 48% are moderate income or above. So it's really clear that the ability of families of color and low income and working families to stay in the city is impacted, but that you know, affluent families are here. And I feel like in you know, in other systems, we're feeling the pressure to respond to affluent families over the needs of low income families who those systems tend to serve. So I'm curious what strategies DCYF is using to stay centered on serving our focus populations and serving families of color, given that imbalance in which families can afford to live in the city, and increasing political pressure to prioritize the needs of affluent families. And I'll pause there.
Do you want me to take that, Emil? Or, so first of all,
You can start.
I just wanted to say that, remember Julie, those are the exact questions we would want to come out of the data gathering process. Because, so this is part one, this is the first phase of our planning process, which is gathering all this information that will then spark all of those questions. Like, how will we address these things? How do we find all of those bright spot programs that are connecting our TAY young people, that are serving, that are meeting the needs of our young people who have mental health needs. And so we first want to create the data that will then back up all of these things. So you're jumping ahead. So hold those thoughts, because those are the exact same questions that we came up with as well. If we're looking at this data that's really hurting us and hurting our hearts, then what do we do about it? And so the what do we do about it is the next phase. It's the allocation plan part. And that's where we're going to force all of us to come together and really go back to, the experiences that we have and that we carry to then help us think about what are some of those programs. Are they TAY workforce strategies? Are they TAY family support strategies? Are they, after school support strategy? Like all of these things, we're going to start throwing them all together. But right now, what we're asking is for us to just look at the data, see if the data makes sense to us, see if these are the right types of data that we're gathering, so that we can then close this chapter and then move on to the next chapter. Amiho, do you want to say anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously it's hard to look at data like this without immediately starting to think about like, what do we do about this data? I mean, clearly these are, while they're not necessarily new issues, they're clearly pressing issues. And so Maria's right. The allocation planning process is where we will actually ask those questions, have those conversations, and not necessarily just have them internally, have them also with other city partners who have a role as well. So to your point around the TAY and the city's processes of trying to hire, obviously there's a need for us to make those processes overlap. We hold a large portion of the youth employment system in terms of getting young people ready for their next steps in employment. And then the city has its own desire to recruit and bring in, new folks to fill all these jobs that are free. Those two efforts could be operating together to leverage the work we're doing on the early stages, and then to create opportunities for young people to actually, access city employment. So those are the kinds of things that we intend to do during our allocation plan process. So just know that that's not lost. But then the other thing I will just note is that part of what we want to do when we come back and have you all think about solutions, it's very similar to what we want to do with our grantees. If there are ideas that you are starting to think about as you hear this data and things that you might be pulling from your, the things you're exposed to or the communities that you're working in, that's an opportunity to come in and share some of those ideas, because we actually want to take those with the stuff we get from our grantees and our own best thinking, as well as those from city partners, kind of put it together and try to figure out how we can put services out in the community that actually address these specific issues for the specific communities that they're showing up for. And we want to do that in coordination. So, hold that for now, but definitely, keep those ideas in mind, because we will ask you for them at some point down the road when we come back and engage around these findings. And I think Ryan can probably speak to your question about the undocumented and LGBT engagements.
Yep, happy to. Thank you for the engagement for the questions, member Julie. Just to acknowledge and respond back, yes, there were focus groups conducted with LGBTQ plus young folks, as well as undocumented youth and families. So yeah, the sessions were conducted back when we were running focus groups after the ball got rolling again in the fall. There are sessions that we did glean notes and insights from that will show up in the full report.
Great. Okay, I want to keep us moving along here, but I do want to acknowledge some of the comments that have come in on the chat, and just because we're recorded, I just want to make sure that we're being transparent. We have another comment that's also striking, is the increase in suicidal ideation and mental health needs. Another comment said, I would like to raise up that the census is only based on folks that filled it out. Many families live in 5 to 8 rooms, garages, or in their cars that do not fill out the census. Families that are supported by our LTF hubs have stated that they make less than $50,000 a year. And then follow up some questions which may have been addressed, but from Julia's 3 questions. Are there opportunities to gather insights into the experience of the LGBTQ plus and undocumented youth? Yes, so we did that. Are there opportunities to gather economic data and about openings and needed qualifications for city jobs and to youth? And how is DCYF maintaining a focus on focal populations given the 48% of the families in San Francisco are now moderate to upper income? So thank you. I just want to make sure that that is recorded. And before we close, I just want to say, you know, my comments are what's striking to me is obviously the just we know it, but just seeing it, the decrease in population, the increase of issues, the intensity of all these issues. And so as we go into next month and looking more at the CNA and then going into the services allocation process, the SAP process, like Julie, I'm interested in kind of leading us into those SAP conversations, because I feel like those are really kind of the heart of the work that you guys do and that we all do and contribute to. And so my thing is how do you focus on how do you get focus if everything is more difficult? How do you get focus, and what is it, because we can't do it all, right? So what are the foundational priorities that need to be invested or continued, right? You guys have already done so much work knowing the investments that need to be made as a base start, as a foundation to allow other things to thrive, right? And so I hope that that's how we can lead into these SAP conversations to understand what investments should be continued, what needs to be changed, and how we're focusing, so we're not giving everybody a penny, but we're really focused on some impactful change that will spur on other impactful change and make it easier for that going forward. So that is just my comment to you guys for now. Okay. I would like to move us on to our next item. I want to thank you all, Miho, Ryan, Walter, for an excellent presentation, thorough. I too want to acknowledge the enormous community outreach and data collection that you guys do each cycle, but I feel like this time was even more intense because of the bifurcated situation and getting more information on top of everything you already did post pandemic or during the pandemic. So I really, really appreciate how closely you guys have been listening to the community and to bring all this data forward to us so it can inform our future conversations. So thank you so much. Okay, so we're a little off in timing, but we're going to move quickly. So let's move on. If somebody could make Lisa Spinelli a panelist for our next item, that would be great. We're going to move into item 7, our governance work. And Colin, can you show the slides for this one?
I can share them, yes.
That would be great.
Hi, everybody. And I just got promoted to panelist. I feel so special with my promotion.
Welcome. Okay, so Lisa, I think that I will start and introduce this and then hand it over to you. So let's see. Great, we can go to the next slide. Our agenda for today. So this item, we're hoping to have a little bit more time, but we're going to try and aim for this in about 30 minutes or so. Again, we're not making any decisions today. Like the CNA, we are presenting information and introducing that for you guys. We'll get questions, input, and what I'm hoping is that we can come to an agreement on the June meeting. So we're just going to kind of context set, level set, where are we at right now? Talking about, Lisa will go back and continue to share with us about and remind us about the strengths that we bring to DCYF's work and why that's important for us to be able to focus on that. And then we'll go into roles. So to bring clarity of that. So next slide. And next. Okay, so why is the governance important? When I had a time, and I apologize, I haven't been well connected with the members, given that I've been in medical treatment the past few months. So early on when we started this so long ago, I touched base with a lot of the different members, and what I heard was an earnest interest in creating positive impact for our children, youth, and families in San Francisco, obviously. And so looking at that, we want to really be able to focus, and as Lisa will go into, bring our strengths to the table to contribute to the betterment of our cities, children, youth, and families, and for each member to have a meaningful experience here on the OAC. And the way that I think that we can do that, so we can focus our energy into kind of the critical issues that at hand, is really looking at clarity of expectations, of roles, and of kind of procedures, so how we do our work. So we're just more focused, everyone's on the same page, we understand how we're going to engage with one another and the work, and we can just focus on that positive impact. Okay, next slide. So where we are today, as I mentioned earlier, we've had some introductions. We've had some fits and starts here, but we've had some introduction from Lisa a while ago, and she will refresh us about serving on an advisory committee. And then we'll dive in and start looking at our roles. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Lisa.
Great. So hi, everybody. Nice to see you all again. So if we can go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about some context setting. And if we go to the next slide, this is me. So these are my talents that you can see across the bottom. And being able to understand what we bring to the work individually and then seeing what the team collectively brings is a really, really important part of the work. And if we go to the next slide, this is kind of at the basis of everything that we are doing with the kind of spirit of doing Clifton Strengths with the group. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about in terms of the high performance team model, which I shared with you last time, is there's the things that we do to create the team, and then there's the things that we do to sustain the team. And the reality is, with new people coming onto the OAC, you're always going to have some element of creating the team when you bring in new people. And so this is an opportunity to think about how to strategically always be able to think about how to bring new people onto the team. And this idea of letting everyone's light shine so that everyone has permission to do the same, this is a very powerful piece to this work. So if we really understand what each person brings, we'll be able to be much more powerful and impactful as a team. So if we go to the next slide, this idea is we start with ourselves first, then we talk about our team, and then the organization, and then the larger community in which we're serving. So we'll be doing a combination of that by first looking at you and then the team, which is the OAC. And then we're also thinking about what does that mean for DCYF writ large? And then how do you show up with your talents in the work that you do in community? And we also talked about the working group as also being a part of the team and organization. So if we go to the next slide, talent's just one part of what of who you are. I think sometimes when we do this work, people are like, oh, you're going to pigeonhole me. And the reality is it's just one more input that helps to define how you do what you do and why you do what you do. If we go to the next slide, and the focus is really on figuring what's right with people versus fixing what's wrong with them. The person who founded Clifton Strengths, Don Clifton, this was his North Star that I think I shared with you the story about him being a fighter pilot during World War II and bombing Western Europe and coming home really upset about the destruction he was a part of, and he wanted to do something positive. So he's kind of the grandfather of the positive psychology movement. And when we're able to apply our talents and strengths in our everyday life, that's when we get great success. We start off by being able to name what our talents are, then really owning them and then aiming them. And that's kind of the basic model we're going to follow. Talent is how we just naturally think, feel, or behave. And a strength is when you can have a performance using that talent. And how we get there is through the investment. And the very first part of the investment is self-awareness. So if we go to the next slide, we know you're going to be happier in life and love your job more if you're able to lean into your talents. And who doesn't want that? Gallup has researched this. And if we go to the next slide, it's really about, they're a filter for us. They explain why we do what we do. So when we're working together, it creates a greater context for us as understanding one another. Or when we're working together and you feel a pinch, or you're knocking up, Maria and I are all of a sudden butting heads on something, but we really like each other. It's like, could that be our talents that are button up against each other? And it just gives you better language to be able to understand why we're doing what we do and like how to find common ground. And then if we go to the next slide, I shared this with you. So the naming it is kind of where we are, and we're going to be doing some work around getting everyone to get, almost everyone's completed their assessments. There's a couple people that are outstanding. And then we're going to be doing some charts to help us figure out what does it mean for us collectively, a team, and then aiming it. And I think the aiming is going to be really important. You know, with this stage of the CAN, you're collecting the data. So people have got the strategic thinking talents. We're going to really want to have those people honing in, because they're going to be able to do great analysis. And for those people who have talents that are in the executing talent, they're going to be the people who are saying, so what, now what? And so it'll be really interesting to see, even through this first phase for this next round of figuring out the funding strategy, how you're each going to lean into your talents accordingly. If we go to the next slide, it helps us do lots of different things, which I've shared with you. And I think it's really important in the context of governance and advisory boards, because if you're not working together all the time, it helps to create some shorthand to build better trust and team building among one another. And if we go to the next slide, it's a little bit of saying, where are you, where are we, and what do we want to be mindful of, right? So understanding who we are collectively. And that's a little bit about it. I think that's the last slide. Go to the next slide. Yeah. So really it's about it's always the Interaction Associates has that great model around the dimensions of success as leaders in the who, how, and what. The what are we doing are the results, the relationships are the who, and the process is the how. And so being able to spend time really thinking about the relationships and being in relationship with one another is really important. And so with that, I'll turn it back to Molly so she can talk about governance. I guess if there's any questions anybody's got.
Yeah, let's actually skip to the next, there's a next couple of slides. I kind of went over the governance. We'll go past this. Are there any questions? I'll go back. Any questions for Lisa? Any insights, any input that the members want to share? Wait, hold on just a second.
Yeah, and maybe pull off of sharing this. Yeah. Great.
So let's just get early insights, and then I'll go into my presentation, just a little process note, and then we'll go into public comment. So we are not going to skip that. So Julie.
Thanks. I'm excited that we're doing this work, and I think it'll really help, build relationships and kind of build this team. One question that I have is it feels very like at the individual level as opposed to at the systems level. And it feels like it would be helpful to also kind of look at, kind of the purpose of the OAC and at a systems level. And two areas in particular that seem like they'd be helpful, maybe some of the Office of Racial Equity tools could be helpful, is looking at how we ensure that we have a representative body that has the voices of our focal families represented and foster youth. And then also in thinking about how to have meaningful conversations that prioritize those voices. And I'm wondering if as part of this work, it'd be possible to do exit interviews, with former board members, and maybe particularly from some of the folks that, are from focal communities, to get some insights into what might make it easier for people to participate meaningfully. Because I know that's something that we've all kind of struggled with. And it's not, struggles that are unique to this body. It's, an ongoing question that, the city of San Francisco is looking at representativeness of boards and, across the city. So I think it'd be helpful to pull some of that work into us as well as the individual level stuff that's here.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's why I think we're trying to develop a foundation of starting, making sure that there's role clarity, and looking at kind of how we work together and what our procedures are, and not just in terms of the conversations like you mentioned, but also just meeting, setting some of the process things, the meeting agendas, and getting all of that kind of looking at our bylaws. And so building all of that to build to continue to build a stronger team layer by layer. So we're taking it definitely step by step. But,
And I think Molly too, I think one of the really important elements there also uniquely is the process of onboarding in particular, because
absolutely.
how strongly you onboard somebody and set them up for success is huge, right? So that's one whole area of focus that we're going to have, Julie, too. The staff is taking the lead on that, but because we know that is that's the first, you've been selected, now you're serving. And if that doesn't start off on the right foot, if that starts off on the right foot, you have a much better trajectory than if you don't,
Right.
if you don't have it. So
yeah. And Julie, I think that, as well for everybody as we go along, especially going into these media conversations around the SAP, around the allocation plan, that's where we'll get to practice having meaningful conversations, and we'll see how we can guide that and just practice doing these conversations. Okay. So there's not any other comments from the OAC. Let's go back to the presentation. Let me finish up with the role proposal, and then we'll go to public comment. So we can keep going to the next slide. Okay, so again, today what we're going to do is share the proposal. I welcome any questions, input, discussions, and then we'll seek approval, which is really to define approval is our group will agree that this is kind of the definition of our roles for right now. We'll seek that approval in June. Okay, and just so we have time to think about it. I want people to have time to marinate a little bit on it. And just to give you some background is that what we took was the direction from the Children and Families Fund Charter Amendment, what was stated in there, and then talked with the executive committee and DCYF leadership, talked with each other and with Lisa, and came up with this proposal. So that's the genesis of all that. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so this is very dense slide. Hopefully you had a chance to skim over it a little bit, but basically the role that we propose for the OAC member is to advise, to endorse, and to represent and promote the community or the public voice. And so really, as it states in the charter amendment, our main function is as it says in our name, oversight and advisory. So it's to advise. We do have some things that in the charter amendment, it says approve, yet the way I interpret it is really endorse, because the things that we approve are either internal to us, like our roles, like I was just talking about now, or for the CNA, like Amiho is seeking our approval of that. Really, it's endorsement of that plan, because the we approve it, but also it does not take away from the mayors or the board of supervisors. They're the ones who really their authority really approves the plan. So I kind of interpret it as endorsing. There are some kind of technical aspects to our role that is stated out in the charter, like reviewing the year-end data, doing any type of evaluation of the director, and of course, maintaining a service provider working group. Okay, next slide. So then we have the other roles, the more specific roles in the OAC is right now we have the OAC Executive Committee, which is the chair, the vice chair, and at least one member at large, and a youth member has to be one of those people on that. So right now it's just me and Jada, and because we've been in kind of a weird transition. So what we'd like to clarify is proposing that the executive committee is responsible for the top 6 items, which is setting meeting agendas, managing and leading the governance, leading the officer election process, membership, looking at orientation, which was mentioned earlier, and leading the annual review of the DCYF director. The chair and the vice chair specifically will be able to approve agendas, facilitate the meetings, leading the executive committee, and being an important connection to the service provider working group co-chairs. And of course, the vice chair will step in and chair. Next slide. So for the service provider working group, this is pretty straightforward and pretty much straight from the charter amendment, and it's advising and giving input to the OAC and representing and promoting the voice of the community, in particular the service providers. So that's them. And then next slide, finally, clarifying what staff does is supporting and managing the OAC. So administration of the OAC and supporting the meetings and governance elements, like they are taking the lead with the orientation process. And that, of course, is with the OAC's input. And as in the charter amendment, supporting the service provider working group. Okay. So that's a quick run through, next slide, of all the roles. So the next steps are for you guys to, right now, we'll take any questions, inputs, things that sound good, things that need to be adjusted, and then we'll continue this discussion and seek agreement in the June meeting. Okay. So Erin, before I get to you, I want to open it up for public comment. So if any members of the public want to give comment on this, please select raise hand or *9 on your phone. And I will see that nobody is wanting to give comment. So we'll close public comment for this item and go over to Erin.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Molly. Apologies up front if I'm taking a step back here, maybe just for a little bit of clarity, because this is my first meeting, but I am very familiar with, the service provider working group and OAC. I actually used to be part of the service provider working group a long time ago. So, but just for clarity, so we're going to work with Lisa in determining, is this a continued kind of working group that we're working to kind of determine and establish these kind of proposed roles, or has this already been worked on and this is what's
so we have kind of off and on been working on trying to establish some kind of governance structure for the OAC over the past year and a half or so, starting with for me personally, it started with wanting to make sure that the OAC members and the service provider working group has clarity around our agendas so people can come prepared and be most ready to give their advice and input based on the voice of their community. And so, and that kind of took shape. Obviously, it was during the pandemic. Other things were prioritized. So we've kind of gone up and down. Lisa is an expert with boards, and so she came in. We brought her in, and are so grateful to have her expertise to give us some foundation of guidance about best practices of working on an advisory board. And then what we want to do is kind of grassroots it and take it upon ourselves and formulate roles. We want to look at, as was mentioned earlier, look at our bylaws, look at procedures, how we work. You know, what does orientation look like? What does offboarding look like? What and getting clarity around that, because people come on, as you know, off and on at different. It's not cyclic. It's like random. It's like, well, we have a new member, or oops, somebody said that they can't stay with us anymore, so they're like we had a member leave before their term because they went to college, right? So these things happen, it's fine, but we have to manage. So as much stability and clarity that we can have set up would be is so important for a member, a new member like yourself, to be able to jump in, and we could give you an orientation and say, here's our process, and here's this, and here's how you can engage. Here's the role. Here are the expectations that we have. So then you can jump in and be like, oh, okay, I understand. And now I can bring my full, as Lisa said, strengths and talents and expertise to the table to share and give all that important advice and input to the DCYF staff in their work. So you can focus on that versus like, do I say now or do I talk later, or what do I do? And when are we talking about this? And, you know, the service providers in particular, they need to go to their community, as you know, and get input so they can give input to us. So there's an added step in there. So we want to make sure that there's full transparency, full opportunity to engage. And that's why we've started this. So we started out with looking at our strengths, getting advice from Lisa on best practices. And now we want to look at and agree on roles, which will let us look at orientation and bylaws and the way we do our work and get that settled. So then we can just like really, especially with the, I'm just thinking out loud now with the SAP conversations coming up, we want to get all this set so we can just dive in and be ready to be like, and, you know, looking at our investments and knowing that we're advising the department to the best of our ability on the investments that they're going to put forward in that plan.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Well, Molly, can I add a little something too?
Absolutely.
So a couple things too is that because you have a charter and you've got some pretty clear kind of roles, but it's not tactically. So what does it actually mean, right? What does support mean? What does advise mean, right? And so by being able to be more granular in a positive way around what the activities look like that you do, that's going to set everybody, that helps to create that level playing field. So people know, oh, I know how to participate. And as I was just even listening to the presentation around all the research, one of the things I was even thinking about, this is an example, Erin, of like, there's the best practices, and then there's the nuanced for the uniqueness of each organization, which is what I'm all about. I'm not a cookie cutter person. I do things, everything that I do is customized when I work with organizations. And one of the things that I was struck by is there's a lot of amazing research around the realities of what's happening for children and families. We've got the groups that are making sure we've got representative voice, but how does the city know writ large what's going on with, you know, with what's happening with children and families? Because if we have a more engaged electorate, so to speak, of San Franciscans, when things come up for a vote, when we have to vote on bonds and things that have to be done, if we're good ambassadors as members of the OAC and we've shared this information, then our populace is more educated, and then it'll be easier to get the endorsement of people. We know things always vote because we love children and families in San Francisco, but there is something around being educated about what's happening, right? And so maybe the education role as an ambassador, Erin, is a more important role that you have to play than perhaps another organization. You know, so that's an example of how we might turn the gas up on that versus turn it back, right? So again, this is all in service to making sure that it's representative and that we're doing the best work possible and allowing you to be completely empowered to be able to be effective in your role and set you up for success.
Awesome. Thank you for the additional context. Appreciate it.
Sure. Julie?
Hi, I appreciate the roles being laid out and also Chair Molly flagging the conversation around endorse versus approve. I feel it's pretty important that we align with our charge in the charter. So I'm looking at the language, it says approve or disapprove in several places, but I'll just read it from the SAP. It says by May 1st, the Oversight and Advisory Committee shall approve or disapprove the SAP. If the Oversight and Advisory Committee disapproves the SAP, DCYF may modify and resubmit the SAP. So that's significantly different than endorse. And I think it's important in our democratic responsibilities that, that's reflected in our rules. And then I had a question, the other two rules that I see in the charter language that I wasn't as clear of on I didn't see reflected clearly in the slide is it's under, let's see, 5J and K, evaluation and selection of contractors. DCYF shall provide for the evaluation on a regular basis of all services funded through the fund and shall prepare on a regular basis an evaluation and data report for the Oversight and Advisory Committee. And then selection of contractors, the Oversight and Advisory Committee shall recommend standards and procedures for the selection of contractors to be funded from the fund. So I'm curious if you can share if those two areas are reflected in the roles, and if not, how those would be incorporated and how we can update the language so that it does, the approve or disapprove language is in there instead of endorse.
Yep, let's see, wait, hold on for just a second. Just looking at my notes. Okay, yep, let me, can you say that again, 5J? I do recall that. It's not in there, but we can add it back in.
Yeah, I just dropped it in the chat, but I think it's
Okay.
5J and K. It's a little hard to tell with the tree of A,
Yeah,
B, C, I, V.
Yeah, the base, the information from the charter amendment that we took, there's kind of this top level responsibilities. But the charter goes into in a great detail in some tasks like that. So I likely missed that, bringing that forward. So let me look at that and bring that forward, and I'll update the proposal and we can take a look at that for next time.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
And the approve and disapprove.
And Molly, I'm wondering too, with all of the changes in the contracting process for the city of San Francisco that are currently underway right now, if how to even have that even be relevant because of the requirements that the city, Maria, I'm looking at you a little bit around, particularly around the consultant and contractors piece, because the standards are being so tightened in such a way that I'd be curious as to what the role of the OAC is over the role of the city because of the level of scrutiny that everything is now being placed under. Just a thought.
Again, I just want to thank you, Chair Molly, in leading this, because especially with the pandemic, I think, our timelines are confusing, our processes are confusing. I know some of these things haven't come up because it hasn't been a normal 2 years. So I appreciate you getting us kind of back on track and making sure that we're reestablishing some of our policies and procedures.
Yep, and definitely, Maria, we'll take a look at that and look at some of the other specifics, the very specific items in some of the charter to make sure that they are still relevant and see how we can include that in our role, but ensure that we have clarity about what that means amongst the membership and staff and the service provider working group. So we're all understanding and clear, knowing Lisa's point is a good one, knowing that things and what Julie said too, things have shifted since obviously the pandemic. So let's take a look at that. Notes on that. Anything else? Any other questions? Comments? I wanted to make sure that we invited the service provider working group to ask any chairs to ask any questions. Because I apologize for people who don't know. I'm just out on medical leave, so I apologize for being out of touch with certain people. I've wanted to reach out beforehand. So Madison, can we unmute Madison?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, everyone. I put it in the chat, but just wanted to note, we wanted to clarify, one of the bullet points said that SPWG is supported by DCYF staff. So just wanted to dig a little deeper into what that means. And then also under the roles and responsibilities section, we do want to see a bullet point that reflects our advocacy work. We definitely feel like that's something that's core to who we are and what we do, and especially over the last couple of years, advocacy beyond just DCYF and OAC, but with the city as well, and reflecting our budget advocacy work. So we'd like to see that reflected, but those are our initial thoughts.
Okay, so Maria, or if you want to respond, the support, I literally took that from the charter. That's all it said.
Right,
I don't know
right.
what that
And,
means. That's why I
in
didn't
the
add any
charter-
bullets underneath.
I know. So in the charter, it says support, the DCYF staff will support SPWG, but in our initial conversations with the SPWG, you all had said that you have a staff person that you wanted to hire yourself so that you would have more autonomy. And so instead of us allocating a staff person to you all, we allocate funds to allow you all to hire that staff person. So maybe we can change some of that language around have a DCYF staff person support or allocate funds, or maybe just say allocate funds to provide support. Good. Madison said that she can't unmute, but I think she agrees with that.
Okay. And then in regards to the advocacy work, let's talk about that. Because the service provider working group, I know needs to create a charter or a
bylaws for themselves.
Bylaws for themselves, yes. So that could be in there. I just want to make sure that, Maria, maybe that's something that you can check, is to make sure that if we note an advocacy work, if that is that in compliance with the overall charter? And if that's something separate that the group needs to do, maybe it's in their bylaws, or let's talk about how that's represented. Is that represented? Okay, hold on. I'm just taking notes, Frederica. I'm going to call on you. Charter. Okay. Okay, Frederic.
Yes, I wanted to thank Lisa for the work done in this process, because one item that I see that will strengthen the relationship is the onboarding piece, because I believe for myself, I was just kind of thrown into the bathwater, and there's a learning curve to figuring out the different roles. And what's a challenge is, because of the vacancies that exist on the OAC, is that many times the SPWG holds a lot of the institutional memory on what was done, what's going forward, as well as the breadth of the services that exist that DCYF basically supports. And so one thing I'm wondering is whether or not there was any, who holds the accountability piece on making sure that that body is properly, where vacancies are not as abundant.
Maria, do you want to speak to that? Membership, in regards to membership.
Yeah, you all know that we've been trying really hard to recruit. I've had several interviews with folks, and unfortunately, because of the conflict of interest restriction that's in our charter, it makes it really hard, because people come to us, they're super interested in this work, and then in conversations we realize, oh, they they're a contractor to a CBO, or they sit on a CBO's board, or they're somehow connected. And unfortunately, because of that, they become no longer eligible to sit on our OAC. And quite disappointingly, we've had several people that's happened to. So we're still trying. The mayor's office knows that we have several open spots, as well as the board of supervisors. And we're, if you can help us recruit, that would be greatly appreciated.
Maria, one thing just as you were saying that I was thinking about is, maybe we've got the onboarding is where we're thinking about kind of that first bit of work, but maybe we should add a little element before around the outreach and the pipeline development. And maybe we think about it in terms of, great board members that are terming off of our partner on CBO boards who are no longer on the board, but they have board experience, who might make for good members.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and that through the SPWG, that we kind of foster that and use that as the as kind of the training ground, like of getting prepared of members, because then they understand the issues, have board experience, and they're not going to be compromised because of what you just articulated. And that will also strengthen the relationships, I think, among everyone as well. So maybe, Molly, let's add that to our list as like 0.5 and ahead of 1.0 of orientation.
That's a great idea.
Okay, we are at time with this item. I just want to say one other thing, just and make sure that there's not any other comments. So thank you. And what was I going to say? Oh, the orientation piece. So the, now the pipeline, but the orientation, just know that all these things that will develop, the executive committee may do some early thinking on this, but we will always bring this to the full OAC for input, discussion, and approval. So just know that, some of the early sausage making will get done, so we can give you a little face something just similar to what we did today, and then can discuss, give input, adjust as needed, and then approve. So just know that that is generally going to be the standard MO for our process, and that so we get everybody's voice in, and of course sharing it with the public and the service provider working group. Okay. Okie doke, great. So we're going to close on this item. Thank you so much. Your action item for this, as with the CNA, is just to think a little bit more and bring any other comments or questions, and we'll get ready to be prepared to approve the roles. And then, so next is our officer nominations and election of vice chair and chair. Oh, that's what 9 and 10 are. Sorry. I'm going to keep blaming my chemo brain for some of these oversights that I make, because I might as well. I got to use it while I can. So for our officer, Maria, do you want to give insights on the officer nominations and
yes. So in terms of nominations or self-nominations and nominations, for vice chair, so unfortunately Rebecca's on vacation right now, but last I checked with her, we did not receive any nominations for vice chair yet. And then for nominations for chair, we only received one nomination. It was a self-nomination. And unfortunately, Jada is not here with us today because she actually had a final, her final presentation for college today. So I respectfully ask that we extend this for another meeting so that we can spend a little bit more time to talk to our members about potential officer roles, and then also to allow member Vice Chair Jada Curry to be here.
so we don't rope her into anything that she actually doesn't want to do.
We kind of can.
I know, but we're going to be respectful. She isn't a final, for crying out loud.
She is in a final right now, yes.
Does that sound okay to everybody, Julie?
That sounds great. Super supportive of Jada. Would be very excited to have her as a chair. And Chair Molly, can you remind us, are you stepping back? I've appreciated your leadership as well. Or can we put you on the hot seat again?
Well, I guess so, but I feel like I've been in this role for a really long time, so I don't want to hoard. That's my main thing. I just don't want to hoard.
So like any good presidential candidate, you know.
I want to allow engagement and
first.
participation from other than just me. So that's why I haven't immediately raised my hand and throwing my great support into Jada, because I think she's ready and it's a great growth opportunity for her, good experience for her. So yes, so think about, so if it's okay, we'll postpone this to June. Think about this now that you've seen a little bit about the roles, how exciting it could be to be an officer for DCYF. Think about that, and we will table this for next time. Okie doke. So next, what I want to do is, I know that I apologize for some of the folks. We agreed to run to 5:15 today, so those participating, hopefully you can stick around with us. So given that, and I apologize it's a little late, but I wanted to invite the service provider working group co-chairs to give their report and switch up the agenda a little bit. So let them go ahead of Maria, just in case they do be respectful of their time. So if Madison and Frederic could be made panelists, that would be great. And is Keon, no, he's not on, I don't see him. But if they could be on, and we'll turn it over to you guys.
Hello, everyone.
Great.
So,
hello, go ahead.
Hi, so Kian is not here because he is a father. So he's on taking a break to take care of his family. And I believe Madison should be on.
Yes, I'm here. Apologies. I run a teen program on Monday nights. So I'm at one of our clubs that's very small. If any children run in the background, please just adapt with me. I'm not in a quiet space at a nice desk today. So yes, as Frederic shared, we just wanted to let you all know that Keon is not going to be joining us, and to respect his time with new baby Ezrin, who was born on April 16th. Him and his wife are doing really well. Super exciting. If you want to send him some congratulations, please do. Also want to take some time to thank Amiho, Ryan, and Wally, who also gave a similar CNA presentation to all of our membership, I think 2 weeks ago now. It was really great to have you all there. And they also created a feedback form for all of our larger membership to go on and give feedback. Now that we have the draft that you all got, the very lengthy document, they extended the feedback form timeframe for us so that us and our larger membership can really go through and then give feedback on the form that they created. So appreciate your team, Maria, for coming to our meeting and doing that. I am going to give an update on the stakeholder engagement process, and then I'll pass it over to Frederic. So I think the last time that we met was in January, which was, as you all know, there was a lot of feelings at that meeting. That was when the Children's First Amendment was first released, and it was the first space really that we had with this group to give feedback. Our membership, as well as the larger community, had a lot of concerns about the charter amendment. And I will say Maria and her team have been extremely responsive to those needs and asked us to lead a stakeholder engagement process to really gather feedback and figure out how we move forward and kind of take the next steps regarding that legislation. If there are going to be next steps, kind of what that process looks like and what the community sees as addressing the needs that we all agree on, better coordination, better collaboration between the city and nonprofits as well. So in that work, we brought on 3 leaders from the ECE community, because you all know that is the other group that is largely impacted by this legislation. So originally it's been the three of us, Keon, Frederic, and myself, and then 3 leaders from the ECE community. And we've been meeting with a consultant and a team member of hers on a weekly basis since March. They have engaged in a series of different data collection processes, doing one-on-one interviews with folks who are here in this room, folks who are probably listening in on this call, and then did a series of focus groups as well. So we'll be giving a final presentation to Maria and her team, as well as a couple other parties that we are inviting to see if they're willing to and interested to join in on that presentation on Monday, May 16th. So yeah, that is an update on where we're at. It has been a large project that was unexpected, but we are super, super grateful just to Maria and to your team for offering us to lead this process. And we're really excited about the presentation and to figure out next steps.
Yes, and we also, I just want to reiterate how far we've come since the January meeting. So it's really has been a growth process, an awareness, and a healing process. So thank you to DCYF, as well as the ECE community, as we look forward, not backwards. And so for the advocacy piece, we're working with the Budget Justice Coalition to support larger nonprofit requests around the Code B increase. I myself have participated in a group of selected nonprofits such as Edgewood through the performance unit regarding what exactly should be, what are the rates and how the nonprofits are dealing with the various vacancies. And we also know that the Code B is a Band-Aid and barely addresses inflation and doesn't begin to address the huge inequities that exist. But we're hoping that this budget year to have more capacity to build out larger asks to address the wage inequity. So we've been working with various entities and possible funders and really digging deep on this matter that's really dear to all of our hearts. And let's see, one thing that comes to mind, I think that's it, but there's a question that keeps coming up when we're talking to the various nonprofits about this rumor about with all these initiatives rise, that there's actually money that has come through regarding community schools. And I'm just wondering if we can either agendize that for later at a different time, because that's a key piece of funding related to all these processes that we just heard today. And that's
Maria,
it.
do you want to?
Sure, I can give that. Okay, I can talk about it now, and I can share it in my director's report too. So I can talk about it now. So the school district did apply for a very large grant with the state. The Board of Education at the state level for a community schools grant. And it was, I think it was kind of jointly written together with some Beacon folks and some school district folks and our community schools leaders. And it's really to recognize that we do have several models of community schools in the city, and that each model is very unique. But at the core of each model, there's a collaborative table that has to have multiple entities at the table. And so I know that in conversations with actually many of the school district labor leaders, they actually fully recognize that CBOs have a role at that table. And so I greatly appreciate them actually agreeing to write that into the application to the state, that CBOs need to be a part of a community schools model. And I personally believe that that's that's because we, CBOs, you all, have demonstrated, particularly over this last 2 years, the value of your work and the fact that you are one big unit together at a school that serves all of these kids. So that's the actual official document grant that was submitted. I think it was submitted maybe a month ago by this time. So hopefully we'll hear back from the state that we got some of the money. I will temper some of the excitement because it is quite competitive. And the state, it's not a lot of money, but there are restrictions around schools that have certain levels of free and reduced lunch, and schools that have certain levels of other risk factors. And so, we'll see how all of these things pan out, but we do have a very large contingent of folks who are advocating for San Francisco to get these dollars. I think the other rumor that people are hearing is the work and the effort that Supervisor Ronan is doing. I don't think it's a secret anymore. I think she has been slowly talking about it with others. So she has been working with members of the school board as well as with labor, school district labor, and with principals and parent organizations. And she's included DCYF in these conversations about how do we increase funding for community schools, or AKA additional supports on school site. And there is a thought of trying to find additional dollars that we can allocate to schools to both support services that students need that are in school, wraparound supports. So it's like full scope programming and supports for young people and families so that they can be successful at schools. So that's going through its process. The supervisor is still working with partners, and I believe that she's going to start talking about it soon, more publicly soon.
Thank you, Marie.
I will actually first let me ask, are there any public comments to this or actually Mr. Item about the leadership elections? Any public comments? Okay, are there any questions from the OAC or comments for the service provider working group chairs? I just have one question. I'm wondering, is there anyone on the OAC who wants to attend this meeting on Monday to hear about the community outreach efforts? I personally cannot attend, or else I would. Julie?
Oh, I was going to ask another question.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, I just wanted to offer it to like one of us. Not all of us can show up to these to this meeting.
Did you want, I thought you were asking the service provider working group members to participate.
No, they are giving the presentation. I was just wondering if anyone on the OAC wants to, staff's going, but I want to see if anyone on the OAC, like I normally would want to be there, but I just.
Well, 10:30, okay. I can double check my schedule to see if I can be available. Possibly,
okay.
I'm not.
Okay. And I didn't mean to duck. If member Aaron isn't available, then I can be back up.
Okay. So Madison or Frederick, would you forward the information, the meeting information to those two, and we'll just have one member of the OAC join, so we're not breaching any issues. But I'll also definitely follow up with the two of you afterwards, just to stay in touch, because I know I've been kind of out of touch recently.
Yeah, we can have Pam, whoever is doing it, who holds the invite, send it to the people mentioned, and I don't know if it's Maria's office or the other, where it's actually being held, actually.
Yeah, I can follow. I can check. I'll figure it out.
Excellent.
Sure.
Great. Okay, now Julie, go ahead.
My comment is back to sort of the governance discussion, and I just wanted to, lift up the important, sort of validate the important role that the service provider working group participates in around advocacy. And the way that I read the, our responsibility in putting forth roles, we definitely, don't want to say we're not going to do something that's in the charter that we're, required to do. But it seems like that's a floor. And so I would love to see maybe the service provider working group put together, some language around advocacy that we could articulate in sort of the practices that validates or formalizes or really acknowledges the role that they've played around advocacy as well. So I appreciate y'all lifting that up.
Excellent suggestion. Thank you. Okay, anything else? Then let's 5:07 quickly move to Maria. Do you have any other items for your director's report?
Yeah, I actually have just 3 very quick items. First, it's summer, summer enrollment. Anyone who has children, anyone who knows children, people who have children, please let them know that we have lots of CBOs and private camps out there who have slots open, and to go and register. If for those who are who need additional support, you can go on our website, and under the Summer Together banner, you can look at all the different nonprofit agencies that are offering summer camps. So please go and register. We are very fortunate that we this year are able to continue to provide thousands of slots for our San Francisco families. So it's wonderful, super exciting. The other really exciting thing that I want to share is that today was the kickoff for our summer learning conference. So part of making sure that all children have access to high quality summer programs, we are actually also taking the time to work with our amazing CBO providers to give them lots of different technical assistance and tools to implement those high quality programs this summer. Today was the kickoff. We're gonna have workshops all this week. So for CBOs who are interested, please talk to your program officers. For those who are not our current CBOs, maybe you can just go on our website and you can learn a little bit more about it. I don't know if non-DCYF funded CBOs can participate, but you can at least see some of the programs and trainings that we're offering. I will mention that we are doing the Summer Learning Conference with our city partners. So there are some school district folks who are going to be participating, as well as Rick and Park and library folks. So we really, really, really want to create this big community of caring adults that's supporting our children this summer. And then finally, along the lines of what Madison, oh, thank you, Colin, for dropping it in the chat, the link to our programs on our website. Along the lines of what Madison and Frederic talked about in terms of wage for nonprofit agencies. So we have been working with the Controller's Office, and when I say we, I really mean Amiho, has been representing DCYF at the Controller's meeting that he's been convening with city departments for the past several months now to really think about this wage issue that keeps coming up. And I will say again that you know, this pandemic really just highlighted the value of our nonprofit agencies and has forced, I'm not sure force is the right word, but has really moved the conversation forward. And I am just so appreciative that the Controller's Office has taken up this mantle, so much so that, you know, like I said, he's convened, he personally, the Controller has convened several meetings with city departments and has recently released a report highlighting the needs of nonprofit agencies as well as recommendations to address the wage issues for our nonprofit agencies. So I just strongly recommend folks to go on to the Controller's website, or we'll try to drop it into the OAC link for us, for those who are interested in reading it. It says most of the things that the Service Provider Working Group has been recommending which is city departments figure out a way to really build the ladder for nonprofit agencies so that we can really build a pathway for staff and for people. And as you all can imagine, that takes time, but at least we now have a blueprint to start moving towards that. And that's it for me, for my report. Thank you.
Great. Any public comments? Is public still around? Any OAC questions or comments?
I just wanted to add to the controllers unit's effort in participating in one of the groups and also being a nonprofit and hearing from my colleagues. There is a huge vacancy in trying to fill wages for between $20 to, I believe, $25 an hour. It's huge. It's taking us forever to fill those spaces. And thus we also wind up leaving money on the table. And then there's just a cycle that happens. So I'm really glad that this report has come out. And I just want to substantiate what Maria has just said.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, 5:12, moving on really quick to our next item, action items. So we have a lot today here, but I just want to go through them to make sure that I got them down correctly. So Maria, you will report on the hybrid meetings situation and understanding remote access and how that gets triggered and ensuring that we have access for our families and the community. All the members, you need to, and service provider working group chairs, just think about the roles and also think about the CNA, be prepared to approve that next meeting. And in regards to the roles, we will fold back in the approve and disapprove language. We'll look at the specifics about contractors and such. And make clear about kind of what the reality is currently, but we'll reflect that. That's from the charter amendment. We will consider a pipeline development process as we go along in the kind of governance work. Back to roles for the service provider working group. If you guys could provide us with some language regarding the advocacy work, and then we'll look at making sure that there's no conflict on that with the charter amendment. And I will make this, I'll clarify and add more specificity to the support piece, staff support or allocating funds. And let's see, we did a special note about orientation for OAC members and the chairs. And we will be looking at charting out our strengths for the OAC just to maximize the looking at our team. And then the service provider working group or Maria, whoever is going to invite Julie and Aaron or send them the invite to the outreach presentation in the event that one of you can join. And then I will definitely follow up directly with the co-chairs. Did I miss anything? Okay, so with that, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Let's put in a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, everyone come, OAC members come off mute. Dory, will you take a vote, please?
Sure. Member Aaron Yen,
Yes.
Member Julie,
Yes.
Member Michelle,
Yes.
Chair Molly.
Yes. So
Right.
we are adjourned at 5:15. Yay. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you working through this hefty agenda. We did a lot of great thinking and great engagement today. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Great work.